In the world of sports, few stories are as dramatic, as shocking, and as morally powerful as the moment when Muhammad Ali, at the peak of his athletic greatness, lost everything, not because he was defeated in the ring, but because he dared to follow his conscience. Most athletes lose their titles after a fight. Ali lost his not from a punch, not from a knockout, but from one single decision that shook America and echoed across the world, saying no to a war he believed was unjust. Imagine this. It's the late 1960s. Muhammad Ali is not just a champion, he is the greatest, a global icon, a man who has conquered boxing with unmatched speed, precision, and charisma. He owns the heavyweight crown, and he wears it proudly. Crowds chant his name, the world watches him, the ring belongs to him, and then, suddenly, everything changes. When the U.S. government orders him to serve in the Vietnam War, Ali refuses. He does not refuse because he is afraid. He does not refuse because he wants comfort or safety. He refuses because his faith, his values, and his conscience tell him that killing innocent people is wrong. And for that, the champion is punished. He is stripped of his world title. He is banned from boxing. He loses his income and his prime years. He becomes a target of hatred. All not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to stand alone. Most fighters step into the ring to prove their courage, but Ali stepped outside the ring and proved a courage far greater, the courage to lose everything rather than betray his beliefs. This is the story of a man who chose principles over glory, a man who sacrificed his crown for his conscience, a man who proved that greatness is not measured only by victories, but by the price one is willing to pay for what is right. In this journey, we will explore how Muhammad Ali faced the most difficult fight of his life, not against another boxer, but against a nation, a government, and the weight of public opinion. And through that struggle, we will discover something extraordinary, that sometimes losing a title can mean winning your soul. Muhammad Ali stood at the absolute peak of his boxing career in 1967. He was young, undefeated, charismatic, and widely considered the most spectacular heavyweight the world had ever seen. Fans adored him, journalists followed him, and promoters saw him as a financial goldmine. He wasn't just a champion, he was a global icon in the making. Yet at the same time, the United States was deeply embroiled in the Vietnam War. Thousands of young American men were being drafted and sent overseas. For many athletes and public figures, obeying the draft was unquestioned, simply something you had to do. The government expected the same of Muhammad Ali. But Ali was no ordinary public figure, and when the draft letter finally arrived, demanding that he enter military service, he shocked the nation with one sentence that would change his life forever. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." With those words, Ali entered one of the most controversial and defining moments in sports history. On April 28, 1967, Ali reported to the induction center in Houston, Texas. When his name was called, he simply did not step forward. Officials called him again. He didn't move. 3 times they called his name, 3 times he refused. According to U.S. law, refusing induction meant a guaranteed criminal charge. He was handcuffed, charged with draft evasion, and faced the possibility of prison. But Ali didn't see this as simply a legal matter. For him, it was a moral stand. He believed the war violated his religious beliefs, his conscience, and his principles. To Ali, following his faith and protecting innocent life was more important than obeying a government demand. Standing in front of reporters after refusing the draft, he was asked a pointed question: "Are you really prepared to lose your title?" Ali answered with complete calm, "My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or shoot some darker people just for the sake of so-called freedom." In that moment, he wasn't speaking as a boxer. He was speaking as a man of faith, a Black American, and a human being. The response was immediate and brutal. He was stripped of his heavyweight title. His boxing license was suspended. He was banned from boxing in every state. He lost millions in income. Newspapers called him a coward and a traitor. This wasn't like losing a match. This was losing his entire career, his identity, his livelihood, everything he had built since childhood. Yet Ali refused to waver. What made this moment legendary wasn't defeat. It was conviction. Ali believed that true greatness wasn't measured by punches, trophies, or titles. It was measured by a willingness to stand by your beliefs when the entire world tells you to surrender. While critics tried to destroy him and politicians tried to silence him, history would eventually reverse the judgment. Today, instead of being remembered as a draft dodger, Ali is honored as a man who stood for justice when it was dangerous to do so. At this point in his life, Muhammad Ali was no longer just the heavyweight champion of the world. He was becoming a champion of principle, and the world would never look at him the same way again. How the government took everything from him. The consequences came fast, almost too fast. Within mere hours of refusing the draft, Muhammad Ali went from being the most celebrated athlete in America to being publicly condemned as a criminal. The same news anchors who once praised his athletic brilliance now read headlines calling him unpatriotic, arrogant, and dangerous. This wasn't just about boxing. This was about punishing a man who dared to say no. On June 20th, 1967, Ali stood inside a federal courtroom in Houston. Prosecutors accused him of draft evasion, a serious federal crime. He faced 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. The jury took only 21 minutes to declare him guilty. Just like that, the heavyweight champion of the world became a convicted felon. But Ali didn't flinch. He listened quietly, almost calmly. When reporters swarmed him outside, he offered one of the most powerful lines in sports history. "If I have to go to jail, I'll go to jail, but I ain't going to fight in a war that's wrong." There it was, courage, clarity, and conviction. Ali wasn't running from responsibility. He was accepting the full weight of it. The World Boxing Association and every state athletic commission moved quickly. His boxing license? Suspended. His championship belt? Taken away. His matches? All canceled. He was only 25 years old in the prime of his abilities, and everything was gone overnight. Most athletes peak between 24 and 29. Every year out of the ring could mean deterioration, speed fading, reflexes slowing. Ali knew it. The boxing world knew it. The government knew it. Some critics thought he would eventually break, that money, fame, and fear would pressure him into changing his mind. But Ali didn't bend. Broken income, broken career, but not a broken spirit. Before the ban, Ali earned millions. Suddenly, he had nothing. No salary, no sponsors, no fights, no public opportunities. He tried to give lectures at universities to survive financially, sometimes getting paid only a few $100s. But his words carried more weight than any paycheck. Students packed auditoriums just to hear him speak about justice, faith, war, and race. Ali was no longer fighting inside a ring. He was fighting in the hearts and minds of an entire generation. Ali wasn't just taking a stand against public opinion. He was defying the U.S. government during wartime. Most men would fear the consequences. Most men would compromise. But Ali believed that morality came before patriotism, and faith came before fear. He famously said, "I'd rather lose everything than betray what I believe." Those words shocked America. Think about it. He could have gone to war as a public figure. He could have boxed for the military. He could have chosen a safe, symbolic role. He could have saved his career simply by obeying, but instead, he chose his principles over his profession, a defiance that changed his legacy. At this point, many Americans despised him. But history has a strange way of revealing who was right. Ali's refusal would eventually be seen as one of the most courageous stands against unjust policies in the modern era. What looked like stubborn refusal in 1967 began transforming into moral clarity as the Vietnam War dragged on, and public opinion turned against it. Ali didn't just lose his title, he gained something greater, the respect of future generations. For most athletes, time outside the ring is time lost forever. But for Muhammad Ali, exile became something else. Another arena, another fight. If boxing was where he punched opponents, Public life became the space where he confronted injustice, ignorance, and fear. But let's remember something. Ali wasn't just suspended. He was erased. His name was removed from rankings. Commentators treated him like he never existed. His reputation was torn apart in newspapers, and every day he woke up without the identity that had defined him. Champion, living on the edge of poverty. Ali went from world champion to struggling just to pay bills. His income dropped from millions to almost nothing. He had no license, no fights, no sponsorships. At one point, he relied on speaking tours in universities, lecturing about race, religion, and war. Some nights he earned $100, sometimes nothing. The same man who filled stadiums was now speaking in classrooms. But while the boxing world turned its back on him, a new audience was forming. Students, activists, anti-war groups, civil rights leaders. They didn't see a boxer. They saw a leader. Universities became his new arena. Ali stood at podiums instead of standing in the ring. He used words instead of punches. He said things America wasn't ready to hear. Why should Black Americans fight for freedoms they still didn't have at home? Why should young men die in Vietnam while corporations profited from war? Why should patriotism be measured by obedience instead of conscience? Students cheered him. Professors studied him. Activists marched with him. Ali became a voice the government couldn't silence. He couldn't fight in the ring, but he fought something bigger. Think about this. Most fighters win with strength. Ali won with conviction. In those years, Ali didn't just fight a war policy. He fought racism, inequality, and hypocrisy. His exile turned him from an athlete into a symbol. He once said, "My real fight wasn't in Vietnam. My real fight was right here against injustice." This wasn't arrogance. It was awareness. Ali understood something many didn't. A man's legacy isn't defined by medals, but by what he's willing to sacrifice. Stripped of fame, he discovered purpose. Stripped of wealth, he discovered humanity. Stripped of a title, he discovered a voice. Exile wasn't punishment, it was transformation. Ali entered as a boxer. He came out as a global icon. Those silent years made him louder than ever. And yet, the clock was ticking. Years passed. Ali grew older. His body matured. Speed, reflexes, timing, everything a fighter depends on, slowly fades with age. The world wondered, could he ever return? Would he still be fast? Would he still be great? Or had his career already ended? Ali didn't know either. And that uncertainty haunted him. But he held on to faith. He believed God had a purpose for him beyond boxing. And maybe, just maybe, that purpose wasn't the heavyweight title, but something far greater. Every day was a reminder. Every morning Ali woke up knowing he wasn't allowed to fight. He wasn't allowed to earn. He wasn't allowed to be who he was. But still, he never gave in. Not once. He was fighting a battle that no referee could stop, no judge could score, and no punch could end. And soon, the world would finally understand why. The Supreme Court decision that changed everything. By 1970, America was changing. Protests filled the streets. The Vietnam War was losing public support. Thousands of soldiers were dying, and many Americans began asking the same question Ali had asked years earlier. What are we fighting for? Suddenly, Muhammad Ali didn't look like a traitor anymore. He looked like a man who saw the truth before anyone else dared to say it. And slowly, public opinion began to shift. Ali's case moved through multiple appeals. His lawyers argued that denying him conscientious objector status violated his religious freedom. Several lower courts rejected the argument. Judges criticized him. Politicians mocked him. But Ali never changed his statement, never adjusted his beliefs, never apologized for his stance. He wasn't fighting just for himself. He was fighting for every young man being forced to serve a war he didn't believe in. Finally, in 1971, the case reached the United States Supreme Court. 9 of the most powerful legal minds in America were now deciding the fate of one man. But more than that, They were deciding whether a citizen had the right to refuse war based on faith and conscience. Most experts predicted the worst. Many believed Ali would lose. But then, something completely unexpected happened. On June 28, 1971, in an extraordinary decision, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously overturned Ali's conviction. All 8 justices, one did not participate, sided with him. The heavyweight champion, who had been labeled a criminal, was suddenly declared innocent. He didn't win with his fists. He won with his beliefs. Ali didn't knock out an opponent in the ring. He knocked out the U.S. government in court. He used no punches, no speed, no boxing strategies. He used only faith, patience, and unwavering conviction. The same man who had lost everything now had everything returned: his freedom, his name, and the legal right to box again. And in that moment, Ali didn't just reclaim his legacy. He changed American law, from criminal to hero. The media suddenly shifted tone. Commentators who once attacked him began praising him. Crowds who once booed him now celebrated him. History had turned upside down, and so had public opinion. And someone said something prophetic about Ali at the time. He was right all along. The world realized that Ali wasn't running from war. He was standing up to injustice. With his conviction overturned, Ali could finally return to the ring. But this wasn't just a comeback. It was a resurrection. He wasn't just returning to boxing. He was returning as a symbol, a hero, a man who sacrificed everything for his principles, and won. When he stepped back into training, he wasn't just preparing for a fight. He was preparing to prove that his greatness never depended on a title. It lived inside him. The world was ready. Crowds packed arenas just to see him move. Reporters followed his every word. Boxing promoters competed for his return. Muhammad Ali was no longer just a champion. He was a legend. And the next chapter, that would lead to some of the most iconic fights in sports history. When Muhammad Ali stepped back into the ring after 3.5 long years, there was more than curiosity in the air. There was electricity. People weren't just watching a boxing match. They were witnessing history. They wanted to know whether the world had lost a champion or whether the champion had become something even greater. Ali was older now, slower maybe, out of rhythm perhaps, but he was also wiser, more determined, and carrying a purpose far beyond winning belts. His return wasn't just a fight. It was a statement. On October 26, 1970, Ali entered the ring against Jerry Quarry. The crowd erupted. Some came to cheer, others came to doubt. Everyone came to see what time had done to him. He moved differently, not with the same lightning speed, but with a new sense of control, strategy, and patience. And in the 3rd round, the referee stopped the fight. Ali won by technical knockout. He was back. He was no longer just a boxer. Every punch Ali threw carried a message. Every round was a reminder. This was a man who had been stripped of everything, and yet came back standing taller than before. People didn't just admire his boxing skill. They admired his conviction. As one sports writer said, Ali didn't just return to boxing. He returned to prove that some things are stronger than punishment. After Quarry, Ali won again. And soon, the match everyone had been waiting for was finally set. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. 2 undefeated champions. 2 different legacies. 2 forces destined to collide. America called it the fight of the century. It was more than a sporting event. It was a cultural explosion. Politicians, celebrities, activists, athletes, everyone wanted to be there. And when the bell rang, the world held its breath. But something was different. The old Ali danced. He was fast, unpredictable, impossible to hit. But now, years of inactivity had changed him. The exile had taken something. His reflexes weren't the same. His legs weren't as light. Frazier won that first legendary match. Ali wasn't unbeatable anymore. But here's the twist. Losing only made him greater. Because Ali didn't just fight opponents. He fought time, pain, exhaustion, and doubt. and every time he lost, he stood up again. Defeat wasn't the end. Ali could have retired, he could have walked away, but no, he kept fighting. He trained harder, he rebuilt himself. Every punch became a lesson, every round became a testament, every loss became motivation. He didn't just want the belt back, he wanted the world to understand what true greatness meant, and greatness wasn't about winning. Greatness was refusing the draft, losing everything, returning when the world counted you out, and still believing in yourself. Muhammad Ali proved that champions aren't defined by titles. They're defined by courage. And that belief would lead him to the most iconic victory of his career. By 1974, Muhammad Ali wasn't supposed to win anymore, not according to the experts, not according to boxing analysts, and certainly not according to the odds makers. He was considered past his prime, too slow, too old, and too damaged by the years he lost. And yet, here he was, standing across the ring from George Foreman, a younger, stronger, undefeated monster. Foreman wasn't just a champion. He was feared. He knocked opponents out as if they were made of paper. Many believed Ali wouldn't just lose. Some feared he could be seriously hurt. But Ali had something Foreman didn't: experience, wisdom, and an unbreakable spirit. Zaire became a stage for destiny. The fight didn't take place in Las Vegas or New York. It happened in Zaire, Africa. The world watched as Ali returned to the continent of his ancestors, not just as a boxer, but as a symbol of black pride and global unity. Crowds surrounded him chanting, "Ali, Bomaye," meaning, "Ali, kill him!" Ali wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a hero, a cultural force, a living legend. From the first round, Ali did the unthinkable. He leaned against the ropes and let Foreman punch. People thought he was crazy. Commentators panicked. Foreman kept swinging. But Ali had a plan. He wasn't being beaten. He was draining Foreman's energy, letting the younger champion punch himself out. And while everyone doubted, Ali whispered to Foreman, "Is that all you got, George?" Imagine the psychological impact of that. Your punches land and your opponent smiles. Round after round, Foreman grew slower. His power faded. His arms felt like concrete. And in the 8th round, Muhammad Ali unleashed a combination that shocked the world. Foreman fell. The crowd exploded. The referee counted. Muhammad Ali won by knockout. He reclaimed the heavyweight crown. Not when he was young, not when he was in his prime, but when the world believed he couldn't. He didn't just win a fight, he won history. Ali wasn't just back. He was better. He was smarter. He was transcendent. This wasn't just a boxing match. This was the moment Muhammad Ali officially became the greatest, because greatness isn't proven when everything goes right. Greatness is proven when everything goes wrong. And you still rise. The world realized what he had become. A man who refused war, lost everything, was exiled, was mocked, was defeated, and yet returned to reclaim the throne. Ali had turned suffering into strength, punishment into purpose, and exile into legend. After the rumble in the jungle, Muhammad Ali wasn't just a heavyweight champion, he was a global symbol of resistance, courage, and dignity. His life stopped being only about boxing. It became a lesson in what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself. Ali proved that a person's value isn't measured by trophies or applause, but by how far they're willing to go for their principles. He had already won fights in the ring, but now he had won something much greater: the respect of the entire world. He fought battles. No one else wanted to fight. Think about everything he stood against: racial injustice, discrimination, an unpopular war, government pressure, the loss of his career, public humiliation. Most people would have collapsed. Ali grew stronger. As he once said, "The service you do for others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." Those weren't just words. They were his life philosophy. As years passed, Ali began using his fame to help others. He traveled the world, promoting peace, supporting humanitarian missions, speaking about faith, equality, and compassion. He didn't just talk about injustice. He worked to fight it. He didn't just practice faith. He lived it. Even after retirement, he continued to inspire millions simply by showing what moral courage looked like. When people remember Muhammad Ali today, they don't just remember knockouts. They remember a man who stood against a war, a man who embraced his faith, a man who refused to compromise, a man who sacrificed everything, a man who became more than a champion. Ali once said, "I don't have to be what you want me to be." And that sentence explains his entire life. He didn't bow to society's expectations. He didn't obey injustice. He didn't fear consequences. He lived by principle. And that principle changed history. He reclaimed more than a belt. Winning back the heavyweight title was incredible, yes. But more importantly, Muhammad Ali won the greatest fight of all, the fight to remain true to himself. In the end, his story teaches us a powerful truth. Real greatness comes not from winning, but from refusing to give up what you believe in, even when the world demands it. Ali became the voice of courage for generations. His legacy continues today every time someone speaks against injustice, every time an athlete uses their platform for a cause, every time a person chooses principles over profit. Ali's courage became a blueprint for resistance. He didn't just inspire fighters, he inspired humanity. The world finally admits Muhammad Ali was right. In the years that followed, something extraordinary happened. The same commentators who once criticized him began quoting him. The same newspapers that condemned him began celebrating him. And the same government that prosecuted him eventually honored him. America, slowly but surely, realized that Muhammad Ali wasn't a troublemaker. He was a truth teller. As decades passed, historians began calling the Vietnam War one of the most controversial conflicts in U.S. history. Unnecessary, politically motivated, and morally questionable. Millions of Americans who once supported the war came to regret it. Veterans spoke openly about trauma, injustice, and the futility of the conflict. And the world began to see what Ali saw years earlier. He was right about the war, about injustice, about conscience, about faith. Governments gave him awards. Presidents invited him to the White House. Cities named streets after him. Countries honored him with humanitarian medals. This wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. Recognizing a man who stood tall when the world tried to break him. Ali wasn't just American. He was global. He was beloved in Africa, respected in Asia, admired in Europe, and celebrated in the Middle East. He became a symbol of strength, compassion, courage, dignity, spiritual conviction. He turned pain into power. He turned rejection into respect. He turned sacrifice into immortality. Time proved him right. What we often call stubbornness was actually principle. What many called arrogance was actually confidence. What some labeled disobedience was actually conscience. History has layers, and Ali became one of those rare figures who rises higher with time rather than fading away. As one historian put it, Ali didn't just live history, he corrected it. A lesson for every generation. Young people today still study him, not just for boxing, but for bravery. Activists still quote him. Leaders still refer to his speeches. And millions still see him as proof that one person can change the world. Ali taught us, courage is louder than violence, faith is stronger than fear, and conscience is worth every sacrifice. He wasn't just the greatest fighter. He was the greatest example of what humanity can be when we choose moral conviction over personal comfort. He may have lost years of his career. He may have lost money. He may have lost fans. But he gained something much more important, the respect of the world. When the final bell of Muhammad Ali's life rang, the world didn't remember him simply as a boxer. We remembered a man who refused to let society dictate his beliefs, who risked everything for his principles, and who remained unshaken by forces that would have broken most people. Ali showed us something rare, something almost unimaginable today, that true greatness exists not in dominating others, but in standing up for what's right, even when you stand alone. He lost his title, but kept his soul. He was stripped of the heavyweight crown, but he gained a moral crown that no government could take away, no judge could remove, and no opponent could ever defeat. He didn't just fight boxing matches. He fought injustice. He fought prejudice. He fought a war that tried to steal his identity. And in the end, he didn't just win. He transformed the world around him. The greatest fight was never in the ring. Long after his boxing gloves were taken off, Ali kept fighting. Against racism, against violence, against oppression, and later in life, against Parkinson's disease. Even as his body weakened, his spirit remained powerful. Even when his voice trembled, his message stayed strong. Ali taught us that strength isn't about muscles. Strength is about heart. Whenever we talk about courage, we remember Ali. Whenever we talk about speaking truth, we remember Ali. Whenever we talk about standing against injustice, we remember Ali. His story reminds us that greatness is not built in comfort. It is built in sacrifice. And in that sacrifice, Muhammad Ali earned something that no championship belt could ever represent: immortality. Many champions lift trophies. Only one champion lifted the conscience of the world. He once said, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." He wasn't just talking about boxing. He was talking about life. And in the end, Muhammad Ali lived his life as the greatest champion of all. Not because he won the fight, but because he fought the right fight